It's 5 p.m. across India. I am Tanvi Taneja. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Global. We'll bring you the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from Paris is my colleague Ross Cullen. Namaste, Ross.
Namaste Tanvi, it's 12:30 across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we'll be taking a look at two UK Prime Ministers. The current one, Rishi Sunak, has been addressing media just in the last few minutes, and the previous Prime Minister, two before him, Boris Johnson, has been facing a public inquiry into his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Let's go back now to Tanvi for the headlines.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres invokes Article 99 of the UN Charter to warn the Security Council of a global security threat from the Gaza conflict. Israel slams Guterres for invoking this article as it pushes its offensive in the south. At the 24th EU-China summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping urges Brussels to work with Beijing to eliminate all kinds of interference in their bilateral relationship. Italy tells China it is leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, but still expects to maintain good relations with Beijing. And Pakistan's Lahore, historically known as a city of gardens, chokes with toxic smog. Sick children line up at hospitals with respiratory issues. In a rare move by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who invoked Article 99 of the UN Charter and formally warned the Security Council of a global security threat from the Gaza war, as Arab states seek to use this alert to push for a ceasefire in the coming days. Taking to X social media platform, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres wrote, "I've just invoked Article 99 of the UN Charter for the first time in my tenure as Secretary General. Facing a severe risk of collapse of the humanitarian system in Gaza, I urge the Council to help avert a humanitarian catastrophe and appeal for a humanitarian ceasefire to be declared." In his two-page letter, Guterres told the Council that the Gaza war may aggravate existing threats to international peace security. He also highlighted that more than 1,200 were brutally killed by militants on October 7th, including 33 children, and 130 people are still being held captive. He further went on to say that they must be immediately and unconditionally released. Accounts of sexual violence during these attacks are appalling, the UN chief added. Stating that the article has not been used for decades, a UN spokesperson said that Guterres invoked Article 99 as it allows him to bring the matter to the attention of the Security Council.
The Secretary General has today delivered a letter to the President of the Security Council invoking Article 99 of the Charter of the United Nations. This is the first time that Antonio Guterres has done this since he became Secretary General in 2017. Article 99 states, and I quote, that the Secretary General may bring to the attention of the Security Council any matter in his opinion that may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. In the letter, which has been shared with you, the Secretary General urges the members of the Security Council to press to avert a humanitarian catastrophe, and he appeals for a humanitarian ceasefire to be declared.
Meanwhile, Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen has said that UN Chief Antonio Guterres' tenure was a danger to the world peace, in fact, after he invoked a rare procedure with the Security Council. He said, and I quote, "Guterres' tenure is a danger to world peace. His request to activate Article 99 and the call for a ceasefire in Gaza constitutes support of the Hamas terrorist organization," unquote. Now, amid this escalating tensions in West Asia, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved a minimal fuel entry increase for Gaza. Israel's political security cabinet gave the green light to the decision as it was aimed to prevent a humanitarian collapse and the outbreak of the disease. In a statement issued by Israeli Prime Minister's office, the amount of fuel would be determined by the cabinet and adjusted based on the local humanitarian situation in southern Gaza. The decision to allow fuel into Gaza is based on the Red Cross being granted access to Israeli captives being held by Hamas. Further, the Jordanian Air Force airdropped vital medical supplies over Gaza on Wednesday as medics in the south said supplies were running out amid Israel's operation against Hamas. Only a fraction of Gaza's hospitals remain operational due to the ongoing Israeli operation against Hamas, and those still functioning are increasingly overwhelmed by new waves of wounded. DD India's Sarah Coates joins us live from Tel Aviv now. Sarah, what will be the repercussions of this rare move by the United Nations Secretary General? And tell us, is Israel worried?
Hello there, Tanvi. Well, look, Israel is slamming the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, saying that he is clearly on Hamas's side here by invoking Article 99, which gives him the power to now call a UN Security Council meeting over things that may not yet be on the agenda. Now, he is calling this war a global threat, but Israel's minister there, Eli Cohen, Israel's representative to the United Nations, says it's actually Guterres that is the threat, saying he is a threat to global peace. But look, Guterres is being backed by the EU's foreign minister and also the head of the World Health Organization. They both say that this needs to be done urgently. Now, as it stands, Tanvi, around 80% of the population inside Gaza are now internally displaced. That's more than 1.8 million people. Now, these people have been pushed further and further down into the south. And according to these aid groups working on the ground there is simply not enough food, not enough water, and absolutely not enough medicine. Doctors Without Borders says that these hospitals can barely function. And we have just heard in the last hour or so that Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the largest hospital in the Gaza Strip, now has barely anything and can only administer first aid. So look, this is certainly very, very concerning. And it is starting to get cold here. Winter is setting in. So we do need to remember that many people are sheltering or trying to shelter, but they simply don't have anywhere warm to go or dry.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And now on to the United Kingdom. Britain's former Interior Minister, Suella Braverman, has expressed support for UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. My colleague Ross Cullen is in Paris. He gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ross, Sunak committed to getting his migration policy through.
Yes, he absolutely is, Tanvi. That's right. The British Prime Minister speaking just in the last few minutes or so, calling a hastily arranged news conference for 11 a.m. local time, in which he tried to regain the initiative about the immigration policy that had been blocked originally by the UK's Supreme Court. He says he struck a new deal with Rwanda, where Rwanda will get cash in order to be able to receive asylum seekers sent to Rwanda from Britain. He said this is all part of his plan to stop the boats, but there's been real problem. His own immigration minister has resigned. He had to sack his previous Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who's expressed support for him because of the situation and the arguing over the immigration policy, which was blocked. However, Rishi Sunak has said that he won't allow foreign courts to stand in the way of British legislation. He says that his plan is to block the boats to try to reduce the number of people coming to the United Kingdom, but he is facing potentially rebelliousness within within his own party over people, his own British MPs, his Conservative MPs, who are dissatisfied with him. But let's move on now to one of his predecessors, Boris Johnson, who is back for a second day of questioning into the UK's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. On his first day of questioning, Tanvi, Johnson apologised for his handling of the pandemic, saying his government vastly underestimated the risks posed by the virus. Johnson's apology was interrupted by 4 people who staged a protest in the hearing room.
At the time that the Eat Out to Help Out policy was being aired with me for the first time, it did not seem, it was not presented to me as an acceleration, simply something to make sense of the freedoms that we were already giving, and it was not. I must emphasise. It was not at the time presented to me as something that would add to the budget of risk.
More on this, DD India's Ollie Barrett has the latest from London.
On day 2 of his evidence, Boris Johnson again turned up to the inquiry in central London several hours early. Victims' families have claimed that they believe that's to avoid seeing too many protesters ahead of his evidence. His allies say Boris Johnson wants to be as prepared as possible. Day 2 of questioning started with a discussion about the controversial Eat Out to Help Out scheme of August 2020, which the government ran to try and encourage diners back into restaurants and catering settings as the economy unlocked. Some scientists have since claimed it helped spread the virus. Boris Johnson said in the inquiry questioning that he has not seen conclusive evidence for that, and in his answers he did not criticise the then Finance Minister, now Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who promoted the scheme at the time. On day 1 of his evidence, Boris Johnson did acknowledge that he could have twigged, is how he described it, earlier about the seriousness of the situation in early 2020. But he said the UK government did its best through the pandemic, and he claimed he got most major decisions right. Day 2 of his evidence is also likely to include a major focus on lockdown-breaking parties held in and around Downing Street that eventually led to Boris Johnson's downfall as Prime Minister. This is his final day of questioning at the inquiry, which is designed to look into preparation for and responses to the pandemic in the UK and lessons to learn for the future. Ollie Barrett in London, reporting for DD India.
Italy has quit China's Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI agreement between the two countries expires in March next year, and Rome has said that it would not be renewing the pact. In 2019, Italy became the first and so far only major Western nation to join China's trade and infrastructure program, ignoring warnings from the US that it might let China take control of sensitive technologies. Earlier, Giorgia Meloni, who's Italy's prime minister, said that the BRI project had brought no significant gains to the country. Top European Union officials and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in Beijing for the 24th EU-China summit, their first in-person meeting in 4 years, to discuss issues ranging from trade differences to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The talks were attended by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, European Council President Charles Michel, and EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell. Xi Jinping urged Brussels to work with Beijing to eliminate all kinds of interference in their bilateral ties.
China and the European Union should be partners in mutual beneficial cooperation, continuously enhancing political mutual trust, build strategic consensus, consolidate ties of interest, eliminate all kind of interference, and strengthen dialogues and cooperation for the benefits of the two peoples. We should jointly tackle global challenges and work together to promote world stability and prosperity.
EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said that Brussels and Beijing have a shared interest in peace and security.
We will discuss how to rebalance our economic relationship. China is the EU's most important trading partner, but there are clear imbalances and differences that we must address. We both recognize the importance of de-risking and strengthening the resilience of our economies.
The EU's Charles Michel expressed concern over increasing tensions in the Strait of Taiwan and the South China Sea, while reiterating that the EU recognises the One China policy.
We are also mindful of the situation in Asia. We are worried about the increasing tensions in the Strait of Taiwan and the South China Sea. As you know, we oppose any unilateral attempt to modify the status quo by force or coercion. We continue, however, to recognize the One China policy.
Now, the leaders of G7 countries are planning to implement a ban on Russian diamonds from next month in a move to try to choke Moscow of the resources to continue its war in Ukraine. The G7 made the commitment during a virtual meeting hosted by Japan on Wednesday. DD India's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Well, from next month, G7 countries will be implementing a goal that they had set way back at the G7 Leaders Summit here in Japan back in May, targeting the global trade of Russian diamonds as it looks to choke Moscow of the resources it needs to continue its long-running war campaign in Ukraine. And that is what it's doing. It is looking at choking off the capacity for Russia to, first of all, extract its mineral resources, and then secondly, target countries or try and pressure third countries to restrict them or prevent them from importing Russian diamonds. This may well involve Russia's BRICS partners, particularly India, Brazil, and South Africa. Joe Biden, the US president, even said at the Leaders Summit in May that the US wanted to hunt out and hold account any country which may be supporting Russia to continue its war efforts, in a veiled reference to both Iran and North Korea. For Japan, it is also contributing an extra $4.5 billion in financial and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. $4.5 billion is quite a large package, considering that previous packages from Japan have come in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is usually geared towards disaster relief, reconstruction, supporting the power grid, which has been battered in Ukraine, and also supporting Ukraine's neighbors, such as Poland, with humanitarian assistance for the refugees that are entering the country from Ukraine as well. It's a very important time for Japan in particular. Political scientists here in Tokyo have been telling me that this last year has been Japan's opportunity on the world stage as the host of the G7 summits and the chair of the G7 itself. It's not going to have that chance again for another 7 years. It's been Japan's chance to put the Indo-Pacific in the spotlight and on the agenda. The focus is very likely going to go to the issues of European and North American countries at G7 summits for the next few years.
The US President Joe Biden pleaded with Republicans for a fresh infusion of military aid for Ukraine. Biden warned that Putin should not win the war and that a victory for Russia over Ukraine would leave Moscow in a position to attack NATO allies.
Well, Congress, Republicans in Congress are willing to give Putin the greatest gift he could hope for and abandon our global leadership, not just Ukraine, but beyond that. We've all seen the brutality that Putin has inflicted on Ukraine, invading another country, trying to subjugate his neighbors to his iron rule. If Putin takes Ukraine, he won't stop there. It's important to see the long run here. He's going to keep going. He's made that pretty clear. If Putin attacks a NATO ally, if he keeps going, and then he attacks a NATO ally, well, we've committed as a NATO member that we defend every inch of NATO territory.
The United States Senate blocked a bill on Wednesday that would have provided security assistance for both Ukraine and Israel. The bill was to provide about $50 billion in new security assistance for Ukraine, as well as money for humanitarian and economic aid for the government in Kyiv, plus $14 billion for Israel to combat Hamas in Gaza. As 49 votes were in favour and 51 against, it fell short of the 60 required in the 100-member Senate for a debate threatening Joe Biden's push to provide new aid before the end of 2023. European Union member states and lawmakers have agreed on rules governing artificial intelligence systems, such as ChatGPT, after 10 hours of discussions. According to the source, EU governments made compromises in the hopes of gaining lawmakers' backing to be able to use AI in biometric surveillance for national security, defence and military purposes. The talks also focused on the use of biometric surveillance, which lawmakers want to ban. And that's it from me here in Paris. Back now to Tanvi in the studio.
Thank you very much, Ross, for joining us. Ross Cullen joining us from Paris. Still to come on DD India Global. India's Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan inaugurates Hindustan Aeronautics Limited's Avionics Expo 2023 in New Delhi. And Harry Potter fans can now get an immersive experience of the Wizarding World with an interactive exhibition being premiered in the German city of Cologne. World that never stops, where information shapes our reality. One app stands out, helps you stay ahead of time. Introducing the DD India app, your gateway to a world of news right at your fingertips. Your most trusted source of news goes global, goes digital. Explore a world of options, top stories, live updates, in-depth analysis, and more. Stay informed wherever you are. Real-time alerts keep you ahead of the curve always. The DD India app, connecting you to the world, one story at a time. Download now and explore the world of knowledge, insights, and authentic. Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I am Tanvi Taneja. Now, news from Pakistan. Pediatric emergency room in Pakistan's Lahore were packed as parents holding sick children lined up for treatment. Lahore is witnessing a toxic smog since last few weeks. Health officials estimated that there has been an at least 50% rise in pediatric patients due to respiratory issues, exacerbated by poor air quality in Lahore. From Lahore to New Delhi, India's Chief of Defence Staff General Anil Chauhan today inaugurated Hindustan Aeronautics Limited's Avionics Expo 2023 at the Ambedkar International Centre in capital New Delhi. HAL will be showcasing its rich legacy in the design, development and production of a diverse range of avionics systems during the two-day expo. Speaking at the event, the CDS spoke on geo-economic and technological changes in modern militaries, and the chairman of the HAL spoke on the ambitious goals the company has set to make India self-reliant in the aviation sector.
All actually in midst of a great change or transformation. It's not only geopolitical change that's occurring, it's geo-economic as well as technological changes. In such an era, it is essential that modern militaries are ready to fight while they prepare themselves for future kind of conflicts. In order to keep pace with this change, it is essential that militaries as well as the scientific community, entrepreneurs and developers understand and identify the key technological trends so that we can remain ahead of the curve.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Russia's presidential election will take place on March 17th next year. The decision was taken in the upper house. According to Russian law, the upper house of parliament must announce the exact date at least 100 days before the vote. Train drivers at Germany's national railway Dioshban will go on strike from Thursday to Friday, according to GDL trade union, which represents the drivers. The strike will affect long-distance and regional trains as well as commuter trains in the cities of Berlin and Hamburg. And Harry Potter fans can now get an immersive experience of the Wizarding World with a new exhibition, the interactive one, which premieres in the German city of Cologne on December 8th. Following the inclusion of India's folk dance Garba of Gujarat on the UNESCO's representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity, students from the Indian school in the Mum organized a Garba performance on the Indian Coast Guard ship Sajag during an on-board reception. The recognition marks a cultural achievement for India, as Gujarat's Garba is now part of UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. That's it in this edition of DD India Global. Do join us at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time for another edition of the show. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram at DD India Live. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We will be back with more news as it breaks air on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from my entire team in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.